Throw your trash in my yard? Enjoy moving, by user_clouds. My, now neighbor was pretty trashy. Cars sitting on blocks in the yard, cigarette hanging out of her mouth while she's 9 months pregnant, blasting Kid Rock tunes level trashy. Well, this lady decided that paying $1 per trash bag was just too much. Our township will only pick up your trash if it is in one of the approved purple bags though. So normal trash bags will just be left behind. The trash truck drives right past them. Her solution? Buy normal trash bags at the dollar store, and have her 8-year-old child toss them over the fence into my yard. Now their trash is my problem. After confronting her, she just laughed. So I called the cops. They said that since the kid was so young, and there was no proof his parents told him to do it, there was nothing they could do. So, this went on for about 4 months. Me taking the bags of trash they toss into my yard, wrapping them in purple bags that I paid out of pocket for, and putting them out to the curb. Pretty fucking annoying. Not to mention the extra $3 or so a week I'm spending on trash bags. I'm slowly growing to hate this woman. It was annoying at first, but I was getting mad. Mind you, I own my home, and she was renting hers. So I get a hold of their landlord, and I offer to buy the house for a decent amount above market value, 17%. He jumps at the offer, and soon I am the proud owner of the house next door to me. Sure, it cost me $71,000, but what price do you put on peace of mind? The very first thing I did was serve them an eviction notice, in person, across that same fence they like to throw trash over. That was 31 days ago. As of today, the unit is empty. I don't know where they went, but they're someone else's problem now. All because she didn't want to pay for her own trash bags. I think I'm going to knock that house down and make my yard bigger. I've been wanting to put in a handball court. Note for the profile stalkers, this is not the same neighbor with the husky, I like those neighbors. Long AF I was unemployed, this guy scammed me. Revenge is still pouring on him, by user Manadial. First and foremost, this didn't happen in the US. Some events might be pursuable up there but down here, it was mostly no man's land regarding the kind of scams I fell for. For the sake of this story, here in no man's land we use the top-level domain NML. My wife is a nurse. Back then, in the early 2000s, she worked in an ICU of a relatively exclusive and therefore expensive hospital. Specifically, she had to care for patients that had undergone cardiac surgery. At the same time, I was working for a small company that was going out of business. The owners were retiring, we hadn't secured any important contracts lately, and in my country you have to pay for employees' severance, unless you file for bankruptcy, so they decided to shut down while they still had enough cash to pay our severances. One day my wife calls me and tells me about this gentleman in his late 50s that had been in the verge of passing away, and after that close call he was so grateful and stuff. We'll call him Benny Lowy. This gentleman happened to work in electronic imports, which gave him access to incredibly convenient deals. Long story short, he was so grateful he could sell us an LCD TV, a store demo unit that had been used just once and we'd need to pay like 1/4 of its retail price, as long as we kept it quiet because he was risking his relation with the brand. It caught me off guard. I said yes and she paid. Anyway, the only TV in the house had been a wedding present and weighed over 100 pounds. We were eager to replace it. I was naive, I know. But I thought, being her patient she knew all personal data from this guy, so it seemed unlikely he would target her for a scam. His father was a known businessman. Now retired and approaching his 80s, Mr. Lowy Sr. was well respected in his community and wouldn't have let his son wreak havoc. Also, my wife had acquaintances in common with Benny's brother, a known doctor of another hospital. Christmas was approaching, she asked Benny who had been already discharged and back home for advice regarding the present she wanted to give me. A phone. He hooked her up with the best she could think of. Now, I can't remember the exact model but it was the Sony Ericsson flagship and it wasn't yet offered by local carriers. He had access to it because of his status as local representative for said brand. She went with it. Paid. I've said my employer was shutting down, so just for the sake of it, she asked Benny if he knew of someone needing an IT guy. Of course he said. I'll meet your husband at this place tomorrow, etc. And there I was, in a gas station, uptown. He pulled over in a luxury car. Mr. Lowy was a normal-looking guy, used a cane and had a noticeable knee or hip pain. We sat down in the gas station coffee shop, and he told me about a mid-management position, reporting to him, in a mining company I had barely heard about. He coached me on what should I say in the upcoming job interview. We spoke about salary. I was dazzled. Wait, mining? Didn't you say he was into imports? He was that kind of guy you can't pause to question, because he'd already thrown something extra to the mix and this position had a better paycheck than the one I was being laid off. In the next days we had a few phone calls, stuff looked promising, I had been already laid off. We agreed he'd pick me up on December 24th and he's introduced me to senior managers as the recommended help desk junior manager. I woke up extra early, put on my best suit. Waited in the front yard. Hours went by. I had planned to be back before noon to arrange stuff for that night's dinner, BC my parents were coming over. After calling him repeatedly, he told me he had been assaulted and robbed. They took my cane and broke it on my knee, he wailed. Poor guy. I told him to forget about my interview for the time being. No, I promised you, I'll make it up to you. Of course, since he had been injured, he wasn't able to deliver the items my wife bought from him. That night my mother asked me about the new job. I could not bring myself to tell her about the delay. I told her it was going fine. That night I googled him. Nothing showed up except for some awards in the Imports and Customs Associations of whatever. He called me to reschedule our interview. Dis 31th. Again, picture me in my best suit outside my house on a summer morning. Of course he didn't show up. When I finally reach him, he tells me that, when his car had been stolen last week, they took his wallet too, which these thugs eventually dropped during another robbery, so now he had been detained as a suspect for that. He hadn't been able to pick the imported electronics on the customs office, so they had them moved to another custody unit where it would take a couple of weeks to retrieve. That night, we went to my parents for New Year's Eve, and my mother asked me for the new job. It's all fine, I said. I Google him again, this time with variations regarding his name or the supposed company he was setting me into. Not much showed up. Nothing shady. The next call was like a week later. He told me that, because he was being involved in a police investigation, this mining company had fired him. But this was actually good, because now I was going to be interviewed to take his position, as IT manager. This meant double my former paycheck, and securing a position that would be a leap forward in my career, so I don't ask many questions, I was just grateful. All those delays in the end would pay off. This situation, as you have already figured out, went on and on for weeks. My interview never happened. The electronics never arrived. We had lost our money, our time, our Christmas, our hopes, and I was still unemployed and hadn't been applying for job offers since I had this one allegedly secured. I texted him, somewhere in between. I texted him, why are you doing this to us? He texted back, if I wanted to, you have nothing on me. But if you stick with me, you'll be rewarded tenfold. Time went by. Eventually, my wife overhears from a coworker about this patient, in another hospital she was working at. Some nurses do work part-time at other hospitals. She had fell for it too, but her husband was a detective, so a few hours later we were filling him in the details of the scam we fell for. Asking around, he found a third nurse scammed by this guy. Soon enough, he was detained, this time for real, and admitted to have been scamming people due to an impromptu invented, mild dementia. This detective talks him into an off-court deal in which he gave us back every cent, but not my time nor hopes, in exchange for us not pursuing any legal action. This was a decent deal, because us, having failed to make a written agreement on any of these purchases, had at most a week claim to our money. BTW, the money with which he paid us, he had to borrow from his father and some from his brother, the doctor. Remember, this didn't happen in the US? This agreement is actually completely legal down here. I couldn't go for any further legal action, but there wasn't a non-disclosure agreement whatsoever. And I thought, what could prevent other people falling into this scammer's lies? Well, perhaps some Google results? So I created a blog, on WordPress.com. Think something like BennyLowithScammer.wordpress.com. It was a single post in third person telling my story. In the following days, that post's comments had a dozen stories much like mine. I made them into posts. A few of them got their comments too, telling other people's stories. In a few weeks, looking for Benny Lowith's name on Google led to this blog. In my country, you can review updates regarding court ongoing cases, except for felonies, that are non-public. Searching for his national ID, which I had known thanks to our settlement, as the sued party, I could just find an eviction action due to failing to pay his condo's lease. But looking for him as the suing part, I found out he had sued www.wordpress.nml, our local Fictionary domain, which was registered by a local guy in GoDaddy.com. Following up with the case, this guy had spent months trying to demonstrate this local guy had to take down the blog I made in the .com domain. Go figure. I was tempted then and there to set a post on this blog saying, if I wanted to, you have nothing on me. However, I have never attempted to let him know who's doing this. I just log into this blog once in a while. Today was the first one in years, and keep finding, in the comments, more scammed people. All of them in a vulnerable moment of their life. Unemployed guys, small startups looking for an angel investor, small branch salespeople pursuing a promising commission. Those who have, in time, reached a compensation or agreement, it's because Benny's now ancient father had to chip in. From what they say, his brother has gone no contact. Most of commenters leave their email addresses, and I have known of a few that have teamed with each other and succeeded in legal actions. Perhaps this is not a revenge, but it's my story. Edit for clarification, so common questions aren't lost in comments. This guy's father was well respected in the Jewish community, but had by this point disowned Benny. He chipped in to bail him from jail, as did his brother, or to spare him jail when an agreement was at hand. In my case, it seems the cashier check we finally cashed in was in the name of his father. I am not sure. But it's not like old Mr. Louis involved himself in any conflict his son would come to. I made a blog, an intro article saying, this is a place where victims of Benny Louis can leave their testimony. And mine was the first and, by then, the only post. It was a story told from the point of view of a random visitor that happened to cross Benny Louis in the past. Things would only catch momentum when comments to this post told just what you'd think. He had a long streak of doing the same, in different variations. I contacted authors, requested for permission to promote their comments to posts, Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V, preceded with a brief intro like, Juan, one of our readers, wanted to share his story. Just to mention one of Louis' scams that took place after mine, now this blog tells for example about the way he lied his way up to being hired as chief academic executive for the IT engineering career in a small but prestigious university. In that position, according to testimonies, he pulled off two big scams.